This episode is brought to you by 10 Yetis Digital. We started using these guys at the beginning of the year and we've had great results. They're an online public relations agency that manage influencer marketing campaigns, social media campaigns, design. They do design, and they cover sort of multiple sectors, brands big and small. Highly recommended. That's 10yetis.co.uk. Welcome to the Tech Leaders Podcast. I interviewed Mark Rice, who is the CIO of The Big Word, who are probably one of the biggest companies you've never heard of. They enable people all over the world to communicate more seamlessly through their language services and their language technology platform. It's an amazing organisation. I really was quite surprised by just how many linguists they employ and how complex their ecosystem is, the ecosystem that they've built. A really amazing organisation, making the world a smaller place, which I think is their actual tagline. We talk about this, we talk about Mark's amazing career, we dig into managing change, hiring talent, and get Mark's advice to business leaders in light of the current challenges. It's a fruitful conversation, which is a massive understatement. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed Mark's anecdotes. I'm sure you will too. It's Mark Rice. Mark Rice, thank you for coming on the show.
Hi Gareth, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. The first thing I wanted to ask you, give us a broad overview of your sort of career journey, Mark, from point of education right up until the present moment.
Yeah, sure. So I'm probably not the most stereotypical technology leader. I think that's the best start point, although saying that, who is these days? So I did mechanical engineering at university many moons ago now. But what it does, I think it gave me a great foundation of what I wanted to do. But not only that, it got me sponsored at university as well. So I got all my books and stuff paid for. I didn't have fees. I was the last year that didn't have fees to pay, which was really nice. And mechanical engineering obviously is maths and physics, and it's everything that's moving on the planet. And what I see mechanical engineering as really is sort of the 80s and 90s version of what software development and technology is now. You know, that's where all the advancements were then, and it's now we're in the sort of technology area and the advancements are then. And I was sponsored by an organization called Scientific Games International. Most people don't know who they are. They do a lot of things, but predominantly in Leeds at that time, they were secure printers. And they printed all the prepaid telephone cards for multiple national organizations. So for those of you who are a little bit younger, I would say there was a time when you got a mobile phone and you had to top it up with some credit. And you used to be able to buy those cards from a newsagent and you'd scratch them off and then you'd put the PIN number in. So we used to do that. But also we did the National Lottery scratch cards up and down the country for many lotteries in and around. So I started my sort of journey in quality engineering in that business, which gave me an absolutely brilliant overview of how an organization should work. Because literally in my first couple of weeks, I had to write the procedure manuals for every department. I was quite lowly, didn't really know what I was doing, but understanding the difference between sort of the guys on the floor who are actually making something and then your sales leaders and how the two things connect all the way through, genuinely gave me a great insight as to what was going on. So I was there for quite a while, implemented a security testing lab for secure testing of scratch cards to make sure that they couldn't be defrauded. And it seems like a million miles away from what I do today, but there's a number of degrees of separation that get us there, I think, which is always nice. But what it did do is I had a manager who took a risk on me, really, because I was the first student to have been sponsored at the organisation for various reasons. And really random story. The reason it came about is I was doing 2 weeks in the summer holidays at university, 2 weeks just work as an admin person in accounts. And I was smoking in the smoking room with the finance director. And I was just chatting to him about what I was doing at university. And he went, "Oh, I think our quality manager wants to have some more sort of students or people with degrees in the quality area. Why don't you have a chat with him? That moment onwards, I think I stayed there 7 years. You know, it was a great education, but it also introduced me to my first sort of love, really, which was the Toyota production system. I think anyone who sort of knows me work-wise would know that I think I link everything back to the Toyota production system. In all seriousness, I see agile in the technology area, as everyone describes as agile, as basically the Toyota production system with a lot less KPIs.
Is that Kaizen or based on Kaizen? Is it?
Yeah, Kaizen, 5S's. It's pull systems. So it's really the concept of, in the past, you'd have a machine and you'd have a warehouse which would have loads of your supply. So whether it's paper, ink, whatever it is, you just buy it in bulk and you'd store it in this big warehouse. And they'd just keep running and running and running, because if the presses went down, obviously that was costing money. But what they realized was the finishing machines ran slower than the printing machines. So you needed a way of being able to organize this. And really the Toyota production system came from post-war Japan. So they were trying to build a market in the US and couldn't get any parts across. So inventory management was really, really important. So they looked at only buy equipment and ship equipment over that you absolutely need, but you'd need some sort of signal trigger system to tell you when you need something. So they created a ticket, and that ticket, when you ran out of stock and there was maybe 3 pieces left and there was a ticket on it, that meant order some more, right?
Yeah.
That's the really crudest way to describe it. That's called Kanban. Now, most people in the technology world now in software development will know a process called Kanban, right? And Kanban is basically just pull the next one from the top. So when you've got a free space, pull the next one. But you don't pull 5 things, because you don't need 5 things. You only need 1. So in those days, you would have sort of demarked pallet spaces, and you'd only have room for 2 spaces, which means that you would only ever have 2 pallets full of materials to create the product that you wanted to, rather than, and the focus was on quality and right first time, rather than just pushing as much stuff through as you possibly can. So those principles really are exactly the same in software development. I would also say the software development companies that I've come across that have challenges in those areas 100% fail on the pull system and are still trying to push things, you know.
Right.
So it's sort of been a really big journey, a really big link between. But when you look at it in those sort of terms, everything they were doing in post-war Japan to try and build 2-stroke motorbikes in the US for a market that was crying out for it is now basically developing all the technology that we see in and around the world. We just call it slightly different names, but the principles are the same. But when you have this differentiation between industries, you know, you have manufacturing, they call it, you know, pull systems or Toyota production system. You've got in technology, they call it agile or scrum or sprints or Kanban or whatever terminology you want to put it on. It all comes back to the same first principles. You know, it's what we live by. You know, we're fat when we eat too much. That's a push system, right? If we only eat when we need some energy, then we wouldn't be fat. You know, it's a pull system. It's just how everything sort of works. So I think the best way, what I'm describing there, is that's when the penny dropped for me about sort of logic systems in those days. And I did, you know, a really, really crude dissertation on silkscreen printing and how different inks work with different other ink layers and oil and water mixes and things. And when you look at printing, most people describe printing as a trade. That's what they would describe as a trade. You know, a trained printer would just play with the machine and put a bit more ink on, maybe run it a bit quicker and get a product out. It's actually one of the most scientific processes you could come across. It genuinely, paper is living and breathing. You know, look at wood and paper. It moves when you've got moisture. So any sort of temperature or humidity change massively impacts the board or the paper. The ink, you know, again, has viscosity, so it's temperature related. If it's water-based inks, again, the water can impact. If it's solvent-based inks, you need to make sure you've got your solvent balance right. And for years in printing, they only focused on what happened on the press. So when the quality changed, they would increase the level, they would reduce the level, they'd do whatever. They never considered the factory they were in.
Yeah,
So,
of course. Yeah.
so you know, there was hundreds and hundreds of printing shops up and down the country in the late 90s. Every single summer and winter would struggle to produce product like they did do during spring and autumn. That was solely because the factories were getting too hot or too cold, and they weren't controlling those factors. So, again, you know, it doesn't really matter what industry I've been in. I've always tried to look at the science behind it and the logic behind it, and really trying to create processes that are in control that rapidly produce really good product first time, whether that's software, whether it's printing scratch cards, and sort of everything in between, really. And it was because of that I really got my big break, really. I moved to a company called 3M, big, you know, multinational company, 3M, and I went in as a design specialist in their securities division. Again, originally as you know, from a secure printing perspective, where I designed passports, ID cards, you name it, and then the systems that go around it. So, you know, it's okay making a physical passport book, but you've got to personalize that book with your details. You need a software system that supports that in and around it. So that's really where I first got involved in the software side of things and the technology side of things. But more importantly, it's where I really first started to discover what the principle of product was. You know, how a product comes from an idea to a saleable product that has a market. You can understand the demand side of things, and then develop based on the feedback, whether that's, you know, a physical carton, a passport, or whether it's a platform on the web at the moment. So everything in between, really. And at 3M, I got really introduced to some significantly bright people. Yeah. So my first day, I turned up. I was joining the Technology and Innovation Centre at 3M. And I don't think there was another person in the office that wasn't a doctor or had a PhD. That was quite intimidating, really.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think I was 25 or 26 going into this area, and suddenly I'm opposite a doctor of physics who was a specialist in how different layers heated together. There was someone else that was a microchip specialist for the chips that were in passports. There was other people that were printing specialists, other people that were materials and polycarbonate specialists. And then I just turned up one day and found a desk and sat down and had a bit of a type. But it was really cool. It was. I look back at some of the happiest times of my life during my time at 3M, because at first, you know, I was learning. I was around a load of brilliant people, but I was really lucky because I ended up on the international team.
Yeah.
So I basically spent 4.5 years traveling the world, which was really cool. So, you know, every country needs an ID card or a passport or something like that, or a system. And I was, you know, going over and talking to potential customers, implementing systems, and doing everything sort of in between, really. And my week used to be Sunday night, Leeds Bradford Airport to Schiphol, and then from Schiphol to wherever I was going. And then I'd come back probably Friday or the week after, which was really cool. Really enjoyed that.
It's great when you're at that age, and you know you kind of haven't got too many commitments, isn't it? You know, traveling around with work is brilliant, isn't it? So,
I bought a house 3 months outside of after I left university. In those days, you could get a 95% mortgage. I think that was the beauty, and it was a lovely, you know, 2-bedroom stone terraced house, 120 years old, something like that. It was really nice. And for 4.5 years, I probably lived in it for 30 days.
Did you rent it out then, or did you just leave it?
I left it. I left it. Yeah, you know, looking back, I probably should have rented it, but at the time, I just didn't have the time to do anything. Genuinely, it was. I remember being given probably half a day's notice to go and fly to Australia for a few weeks. You know, I was in Romania on and off for 2 years, pretty much either every week or every other week, and Eindhoven, because we put the Romanian passport system in, and had a wonderful time in Bucharest. But the best time was in the bar. Now, not for all the usual reasons, which are a given, because Bucharest is a brilliant place and an absolutely fantastic place. But I was sat with some different people from different parts of 3M from around the world. One of the best things I like is sitting in a hotel bar having a beer, and just asking questions and then listening.
Absolutely.
And these people just want to tell you everything.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So
I tell you what, Mark. Let's just to unpack that one a little bit. I think that is one of the things that's going to be. How can I put it? That's going to be quite challenging to replace if we are in a world of social distancing. I'm not talking about the bars being closed, but that, even though that will be a challenge. But I mean, I was talking to someone recently about the water cooler principle, which is basically in big companies when people are working in different departments, they generally don't interact, and they generally have like serendipitous conversations next to the water cooler. And that's where a lot of creativity and innovation comes from, because I'm talking in very corporate organizations. And I know it's completely different to what you just said, but it is a similar principle, isn't it? You spend all day working, but the best ideas of the day come in the pub in the night, because you're being challenged by people who work in different worlds to you, and it makes you think. It makes you think outside of the box, doesn't it?
This is I see when we talk about the future and the post-pandemic world. Even if we are allowed to, I think we get to a point where people are going to be reluctant for a while to do so. So you'll remember the days of sort of conventions that are going on. You've got 300 or 400 people staying at the same hotel, and on an evening everyone goes to the bar. I just can't see that happening in the next year and a half.
Yeah.
I can see some events happening. What's absolutely clear to me, 100% agree with the point that you said. I don't know how I would have been able to gain that knowledge in a socially distant world. And I think that's a challenge that needs to be overcome. It's certainly not going to be overcome by video, because video is still a very different thing. Some people are used to it, some people like it, some people don't. But people are still reluctant to share their deepest secrets over the internet.
Well, do you know what, Mark? Right, I before this lockdown, I wouldn't do video link podcasts. Every single one I recorded was face to face, because I just thought you kind of lose that, that natural conversational element. Obviously, my hand has been forced, and don't get me wrong, we've recorded some really good podcasts remotely, so my view has changed a little bit. But it is better face to face, isn't it? You can't really replace that in any walk of life.
And I think we will. It's like I can catch up with my mates over WhatsApp or on a video call, or even just ring them up, in the olden days. But there's nothing like sitting in a bar and talking nonsense for a few hours, no matter who you're with, because some gems come out of that.
Absolutely.
You sit and talk to someone about a problem that you've got, and then they suddenly go, "Do you know what? I used to have that problem a year ago, and this is what I did about it." So you've got an idea. At the moment, I think the worry I have is everyone goes to the internet for the solution to the problems. So they Google the same question. So everyone gets the same answer. It's, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And that's good, but I'm a born and bred people person first. You'll, as we're talking about my career and over the course of it, the one thing that is constant throughout is it's always been a people thing. I've always only wanted to work for people that I respect and think I can learn something from. Absolutely. I've always been really clear about that. Even since, from the age of 20, 21, when I was still at university, I decided very early on, if I wasn't going to be able to learn at least one thing from someone, I didn't want to work for them. And I turned down a number of jobs along the way that probably would have paid me more, probably would have had a more accelerated rate through career. But I just didn't see myself having that human interaction with someone and that bond. My first boss I talked about earlier, Andy Jackson, he was a great guy, absolutely brilliant guy, huge Sheffield United fan, massive Sheffield United fan. So, and he'd lived for a time in Liverpool as well, so we had a number of things in common, and we just used to spend literally so much time just talking about football, and then onto life, and then onto work, and it was in that order. Whereas now we tend to have these video calls, which is, "Hi, how is everyone? Oh yes, we're okay. Right now, let's start the agenda." It's just a bit forced. So but I'm in the modern world. I obviously I'm hopefully a technology leader, but I like technology that complements what we do as people rather than changes what we do as people. So video calls are okay and they're good, but I think without the pandemic, I don't think they would have anywhere near the take-up that they've had. And I actually think the take-up will go down as well once the pandemic stops. Because, you know, I don't hear any more about family members or friends holding Zoom quizzes. But 13 weeks ago, that seemed to be the thing to do.
Yeah. Well, we actually we give ours a break because people were getting a bit sick of them.
Exactly.
We might pick it back up, but I mean, but yeah,
you know,
no, I totally agree. I
vape, you know, unashamedly vape these days rather than smoke. And the main reason I love vaping is when I'm in a pub talking to my mates, if a topic comes up I don't want to talk to them about, I can just go outside for 5 minutes.
Yeah,
whereas
absolutely.
when you're on a video call, it's a bit awkward, isn't it?
Do you know what, Mark? I smoked for years, right? And the thing I miss the most about it is not so much the smoking, it's the social element of going outside and having a conversation with someone that you don't know. Because when I stopped smoking, I missed that because there's no other excuse to talk to strangers.
That's it. I
had to set up a podcast to do it.
Well, look what I said maybe 10 minutes ago. I got my sponsorship at university, which started my career from smoking with the finance director at break time in a smoking room. Now, for those of you who don't realise, there was a time where businesses had smoking rooms that you could sit and physically smoke in, and didn't have any sort of air conditioning to try and take out the smoke or anything. It was very, very odd.
It seems crazy now, though, doesn't it? But it was like, I remember going on aeroplanes and there was like cigarette, cigarette ash flicking things on the side of the arm. Like, you know, you tell a young person, no, they're just like, what?
Well, I showed my 8-year-old many things over the years. The particular one that I always like to blow her mind with is that a microwave didn't exist when I was born. She can't get this through her head. So it would never been comprehended. And also when I tell her that the internet is only really 20 years old, something like that. It's not that old. But internet as we use it today is very, very young. And she sits and goes, but what's the internet? And I go, I'm not really sure I'm going to explain that to an 8-year-old.
You should have just said TikTok and they would have known what you meant.
Well, exactly.
TikTok or Snapchat, and they would be like, oh, that, I know what that is.
Like, I'm fighting these things at the moment, but I'm going to have to embrace them at some point, I suppose. But yeah, it's all good. But yeah, as I was saying, the people element that you mentioned, really, really important. I met a guy at 3M. A lot of people I worked there with, a lot of respect for. But one guy, I don't think he intentionally did it. He seemed to take me under his wing a little bit. He was such a genuinely nice guy, but he'd been brought in from the sort of wider 3M into the technology and innovation. And he wasn't a doctor or a highly qualified person either. He was just a 3M veteran. So he'd moved from various different 3M sites, and he'd gone up the sort of people management level. That's the way that he'd sort of progressed, really. And he knew how to deal with people. And he taught me two things, which always stick. One, he introduced me to what is my favourite book now of all time, and I give it to everyone. It's like a secret. I don't know if I'm giving away 3M secrets today, but the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the Stephen Covey book.
Yeah, of course.
That gets handed out to your high potential people.
Yeah,
and it's given to them in a way which is. It's sort of said like use it as a book stop, or use it as a doorstop if you're not going to read it, because it's a big thick book. But if you do read it and you want to have a chat, let me know. And that's like the test. So if you read it and are interested and you go back to the person and go, let's have a chat about it, suddenly you're on a mentoring scheme, which is kind of powerful. But he introduced me to that book, and I said we were in Romania together, we were in a bar together many weeks. With some ridiculous stories along the way, by the way, Yeah, I think really what I was saying was that the modern world and the post-pandemic world is going to be, really, really challenging, because I met a guy who introduced me to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey, and Dave Watson was the guy, and he hadn't come from a particularly technical background, and he wasn't a particularly academic. He'd done that later in life. Actually, he'd got his degree and things later in life. He'd started from the Northeast. He'd started off as an actual hands-on engineer and things like that. So, but he taught me one really important thing in arguments or debates, and that was the art of silence, which I still use to this day. 17 or 18 years later, you just hold you don't say anything when because someone will say something back to you. They will just openly, admit. So yeah, so that, 3M got me involved in actual systems and product, and how you sort of bring all the different elements together. It's there's a Shipley Wins model, sales model, that's widely known about these days. I was involved in that process without knowing it, many moons ago now. It was the way of doing it in those days for big programs. But what a time, living in hotels in Romania. I remember going to Norway, Sweden, and Denmark in 1 week. That was kind of weird. I didn't know where I was. Time in Australia, I think a great time. So I was taking some sample passports over for a sort of bit of a beauty parade with the Australian government in Canberra. And Canberra's a very strange place, actually. Lovely place, but nothing happens from 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon till Monday morning at 10 a.m. because everyone just goes home. So you're just there on your own. It's a really, really bizarre place.
So nobody actually lives there. It's a bit like central London, is it?
Yeah. There was just, imagine being in a hotel on a Saturday on your own in Australia in your mid-20s, and you walk down to the bar and there's nobody there. There's not even a restaurant open. It was very strange. But I remember taking sample passports over with me. And you have to declare it, obviously, when you go into the country. And I got held, obviously. I had a letter to be able to say that I had permission to take these things across. I was held for about an hour and a half or so while they checked it all out. But then they wanted to have pictures taken with potential new passports, which I wasn't allowed to do. But I had these security officers just going, look at this. This is amazing. Can we have a look through them? Just some bizarre things, really bizarre. I got chased through Bucharest by 6 dogs. That's one of my go to the pub stories. When a local Romanian tells you you've got 2 choices, if you run away, they'll probably chase you and bite you. If you stand still, they'll probably chase you and bite you. What do you do? What do you do? So yeah, very bizarre life. I'd done. So then finished at 3M, loved 3M. Would never have left actually, but because of all this international travel, you can probably work out now on the timeline that this was about 8 and a bit years ago that I moved on from 3M, and it coincides with the birth of my daughter.
Oh,
So I made a decision really quite early on that I really wanted to be a hands-on dad, something I'd always really wanted to be, and I didn't really want to be away as much as I was. I think I was a KLM platinum card holder, which was one of my claim to fames at the time. Business class experience without paying business class. It was amazing.
yeah.
But I think I was doing 110, 115 flights a year,
Wow.
which is a lot. My knees will tell you it's a lot these days as well, because I'm getting a bit older. But yeah, so I decided, right, I'm going to leave 3M. I spoke to 3M and said, is there anything more sort of something UK based moving forward? And it wasn't. It was going to be more international work at that time for the next couple of years. So I made a hard decision to move on. Went to a brilliant organisation, but probably looking back now, I made the decision to move to Hallmark cards for the wrong reasons. I moved there because it was in the UK, it was local, and it meant I could spend time with my daughter. But actually, the role itself came secondary, I think is the best way to put it. And it's the first time in my career I've ever chose a job rather than a role, I think. And
I was going to say, because it's a bit of a sidestep, wasn't it? You've moved in from, you're obviously, you've got this career going towards product and design, and all of a sudden you're doing manufacturing and supply chain, which is a bit of a different world, isn't it? Obviously the principles are the same. I understand that, but it is slightly different, isn't it?
Well, it's those people who know me. I have like a phrase: "How hard can it be?" I could probably do it. It was printing, tick, done that before. It was manufacturing, tick, done that before. Supply chain, well, really, it's just pull systems. The same principles done before. Yeah, probably done that. And really, the way the job was sold to me, really, to start with, was about the product side. So how do we get the manufacturing site to be able to create more proof of concepts, more rapid prototyping, so the same sort of principles, really. But it wasn't really that job when I joined. The business was going through a huge transformation at that time, and actually a transformation in Hallmark UK, because we're talking, I can't remember what year the specific was, maybe 2012, something like that. And the rise of Moonpig, all of the sort of challenges of low cost supermarkets were really eating into all of the revenues and profits of Hallmark. And I think they lost their identity a little bit during that period.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know what they wanted to be. They knew they wanted to change, but they didn't really know what they wanted to change into. So I joined Hallmark, and there was probably the most basic online card maker system you've ever seen, when their biggest competitor, Moonpig, and such like UK Greetings, they're sort of taking the market away from them, and they were just passively letting them take the market away. And then there was a move of all manufacturing over to China, and it was just a really strange time. I think it was a strange move. My boss that employed me, Annabelle, I think she moved on, or was moved on, maybe 3 or 4 months after I joined, and then it was just really confusing. Very, very confusing setup. So, but I still learned things, and I still met some brilliant people. For example, 0-hour contracts I'd never come across before. I'd never been responsible for health and safety and fire regulations on a site before. That was an eye-opener on my first day when a printing press went on fire. That was interesting. And these things happen. But yeah, it was fab. But I was only there, I think, 18 months or so, because it became pretty obvious to me it wasn't necessarily something that was going to be a long-term path for me. And I again, in all seriousness, I openly hold my hands up to these things. I made that decision there specifically to spend more time with my little one while she grew up and help in that side. So then jumped into Hermes, which is one of the most fascinating companies I've ever worked for.
So why did you become a fashion designer then?
Oh, yeah. I spent my days designing handbags and scarves in Paris. Yeah,
obviously, we're not about Hermes, the parcel delivery firm, of course. But that's interesting. That's a global organisation, isn't it? And I think it took you back into sort of more product-led endeavours then, which is what you probably defined as what you were probably best at,
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say, product is probably what I've always been born to do. I think it just falls naturally. Hermes was a really interesting one. Hermes today is very different to the Hermes that I joined. Brilliant organisation, by the way. Parent, sort of the overall Hermes group, based in Hamburg in Germany, where I spent quite a lot of time. But the Hermes UK business sort of spun out of catalogue delivery in the UK, and it had quite a family feel. And the CEO at the time, Carol Woodhead, brilliant woman, really absolutely brilliant. I think she got the job to lead Hermes on the back of a dissertation she wrote at university, and then sort of worked her way up, and then led Hermes for 12 or 13 years. And Hermes I joined they had a strategy, and I hope I'm not giving any secrets away here. The strategy was fill your boots. That was it. Right? It wasn't complicated. It was Royal Mail and DPD and those type of companies. They're really expensive. Let's just be cheaper than everyone else and get all the rest of the business. The 3 to 5 day delivery stuff at that time. So they filled the boots up, and they'd done a really good job at it, and that's how they'd grown. The reputation was bad because no one ever knew where a Hermes delivery was going. They were cutting edge in using self-employed freelance couriers model to be able to implement.
That's what Amazon do, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. They were absolutely ahead of the game doing those sort of things, and it was a brilliant model. So as it was a freelance model, you had very low cost base, so you could go in really, really, really low cost. But what happened very, very quickly, sort of around about 2013, you may remember, probably a bit earlier, but only came through. Retail really started to get a real customer experience jargon. Everything was about customer experience, whether it be website experience, whether it was in-store experience, whether it was checkout experience. Everything was all about making sure you maximize the opportunity for someone to always buy something from you. And, that was the key. And then with the rise of e-commerce, it became really clear to the retailers that the most complaints they were getting were from the delivery side. So, back in the day, in the 80s, 4 to 6 weeks delivery. In the 90s, you had it down to maybe 5 to 10 days delivery. And in the 2000s, it was standard 3 to 5. And if you wanted anything next day, well, you could cross your fingers and pay 50 quid. That was about it.
Yeah.
But then there was a demand for instantaneous gratification from, millennials, from people who were utilizing technology in a way that they'd never used it before.
Yeah.
Who were ordering things and they wanted it to be sent. But Hermes had never really thought about product. So they saw product as the services. So a 3 to 5 day delivery or a next day delivery, that was a product to them. And it probably could be, you could define it as a product because you're selling it, but it's really a service in my sort of definition. And they have the ability to be able to create maybe, a new app for deliveries. That was something we did very early on, to be able to communicate more effectively with people. The ability to do Sunday delivery, that was something I wasn't specifically involved in that one, but was the growth of that product area at that time. When I joined Hermes for a guy called Gary Winter, who was the sales director at the time, I think he's sales director now for, or commercial director for a big parcel company as well, and used to be at Royal Mail. He brought me in, and when I joined, I had a few days with the guy that was leaving. That was the product department.
Right, okay.
I was like, okay. And then there was a guy that had been brought in to lead it. Really nice guy, but he was an architect, an IT architect previously.
Yeah.
And they misaligned this whole technology product, and you need to bring something a bit closer to the center, a bit more understanding. But it was brilliant. I got to develop an international product, and it also, it came about around about the time where organizations, which is something I faced now, but organizations started to think about their monolithic technology stacks. The bits where they had a labeling system or a routing system, and it had been in for 10 or 12 years, and no one wanted to change it. And there was no one left working there that knew how it worked. It just worked. Yeah. But they knew that the next generation of what they wanted to do as an organization, they needed to make a big change. And to be fair to them, they've invested hugely. They got a really good guy in to lead the technology area. And he brought some people in with him who were really, really good. I would say just from, it's not disrespectful to the people who work there, but the guys that came in were just a slightly different level. Good. And from then onwards, I realized that what I'd been saying about my observations of the technology stack in Hermes, when they started making those changes, I realized sort of in my head, I was right about that. And then I was interacting with the software guys, and it was like, you can do this in a slightly different process way. And they were going, that's agile, that's this, that's got this name, and that. It's like, right, the penny's dropping here. So I thought, okay, I understand those areas, but I need a new challenge. And I needed a new challenge in Hermes. Hermes was a lovely place, great leaders, but ruthless, like utterly ruthless.
Well, I think for companies who've got a bit of a low margin, undercutting the market type of culture, then they have to be ruthless, don't they? I suppose that's just embedded into the way the organisation is run.
It was the first organisation in my career where I experienced people having agreements to leave.
Right. Okay.
That regular, someone would be there one day and then they wouldn't be there the next day, so they'd have a compromise agreement, without prejudice conversation, and away they go. But it was literally, if you failed or even looked like you were failing in one area, that was it. Change. So in some ways, I learned a lot about that, because actually it was very effective.
Yeah. So I always just remembered about Hermes having to drive about 5 miles to pick up my parcel. So I always thought, if I ever have a Hermes delivery, I'd better be bloody in the house, because I ain't driving, up to Pontypridd from Cardiff just to get my parcel.
and that's the same message that they got. Look, so now Hermes have done a great job. They've got a better parcel tracking system. They give you an estimated time of arrival. They deliver 7 days a week. I'm not here to sell Hermes, but I'm saying, in that 3 or 4 year period, the change was huge, and even still is now huge. I know they have challenges. I think there was an issue last week actually where they lost some parcels, or a routing system stopped working, but these things happen. But again, I was very product led, loved the place, was learning from people in and around me. That was always key. I wanted to learn from people. And then when I stopped learning, that's when I wanted to move on.
Well, if you stop learning, then, you've got to look for pastures new of you. I mean, talking to someone before about who was a sort of a career advisory expert, and he said, the two main pillars are you happy and are you learning? And if one of those are not there, then you've got to look to make a change, But
the good thing that happened at Hermes, and I think it was a really strange thing also that helped me, not took my eye off the ball, but made me rethink about what I wanted to do. I met my my now other half at work at Hermes 5.5 years ago. I always say she used to sit at the desk across from me and just used to stare at me constantly like a stalker. He said she was just looking out the window. I happened to sit in front of a window, but I like my story better. It sounds more fun. But yeah, that was a more challenging experience. Having a relationship with someone in the business in the same department, sitting next to each other. That was something that I needed to make a decision on. And actually, we both made a decision. We both left at the same time.
Yeah,
different organisations, because I just didn't want to talk about parcels when I got home.
I don't blame you. So you left there then, and you had you set up a consultancy firm, but then not too long after that, you ended up going to the Big Word, doing a head of product role. Yeah, talk us through that period of your life and the run up to where we are now. Then, Mark.
Yeah, so as with a lot of people, I got one big piece of business as an offer to do something outside of Hermes, and my contract at Hermes probably wouldn't allow me to do that. So I needed to make a decision to leave. We moved. We went on to pastures new, and I set up the business really just to facilitate that one customer at the time. So it was to do one piece of work. And in all seriousness, I can't actually go into too much detail about it. But what I did was introduce the concept of the conversation for customer experience in websites and brand. So when you go onto a website, in the past, you used to have a load of drop-down boxes that you would do. But actually, if you treat a website and the screen that you're looking at as another person who's having a conversation with you, you start to realize where the challenges are in a system and in the customer experience and in the user journeys. Very product related, this, by the way, extremely product related. And yeah, it was that whole conversational story. So how do you ensure that customers maximize their basket sales? So when they look at something and they put it into the basket, how do you make sure they buy it? And secondly, how do you make sure they retain it? So you don't want to return, because it's a net zero if you get a return. So yeah, I did a bit of work there. Did a bit of work for a couple of other clients, which were related to sort of managing a program of work and a project. And I had genuinely all the intentions of growing that, and growing and growing and growing. And it was going quite well. And then out of the blue, I got a call from a recruiter who now she's in recruitment for Facebook now in Ireland, actually. And she just rang me and said, "We've got this interesting opportunity at the Big Word. Would you be interested?" And I said, "No, I wouldn't. I'm all right, thanks." And so then she said, "Well," she said what the role is, and she said, it's head of product and technology." I was like, "Okay, it sounds okay, but I was looking for something a little bit, maybe a bit bigger." By the way, I'd had a look into the Big Word. Like you, I didn't really know who they were. I'd heard of them, but didn't really know who they were. And strangely, one of my friend's wives worked there, and she'd always described herself as a project manager. And I just simply assumed she was a project manager in the normal sense of the word. But actually, no, a project manager in the language industry is very, very different. So she was a project manager in the language industry. So that sort of then made me understand it. But then I read a little bit about the Big Word, and I became fascinated. And I became absolutely fascinated with the owner of the company, Larry Gould. Okay. He's one of the most brilliant people I've ever come across, and I don't say that lightly. And it's nothing to do with where I work at the moment. He could let me go tomorrow, absolutely, and it could be very bitter. I will still love him very dearly in the future because he's such a character, brilliant character. He's the first person I saw do a LinkedIn video to Theresa May and Boris Johnson from his bath in the Hamptons in New York. That's what we're talking about. And he's just an entrepreneur. And the more I read about it, the more I was fascinated. So I went in to see them, and I met the former deputy CEO, Diane Cheeseborough, and the former CTO, Mark Clayton at the time. And honestly, I walked away from the interview and I was like, yeah, it's not for me. It's not for me. It was, I really love this whole image of Larry, family orientated business, very entrepreneurial, a demand for excellence and customer experience and real passion for the linguist community. All of that sold me. But I didn't get any of that from the interview. Didn't get any of it. Nothing at all. Which was just really, really sad. And I thought, oh wow, there's nothing there. But then Jess, who was the recruiter, she just rang me up, and between her and my other half, Lynette, they basically bullied me into taking the job over a 3-week period.
Maybe they were collaborating in the background.
I think they both could see the opportunities there, and they both could see that it would suit my personality. Yeah. And I think they both could see that it would be a really, really, really good fit. And do you know what? I joined as head of product and technology, and within 11 months, I was CIO.
Wow, that's got an astronomical rise then, yeah?
Yeah, and it's just a good fit on both sides. And I think a lot of the things that I've learned over the years, suddenly I had the opportunity to go and try and test, for real. And, I have a principle of, if it's working, keep doing it. If it's not working, stop doing it. So I just keep doing it. And yeah, I would say the big word, my 3 years now at the big word, 2 years as group CIO, I think have been the most rewarding, the most demanding, but are the highest in my achievements. Absolutely the highest.
So give it to us in a nutshell then, what the sort of mission statement and the purpose and the kind of the reason for the big word. What do you guys do? What do you achieve? What do you do? What are you trying to make better?
Yeah, so the big word believes that the final barrier to trade and peace is language.
Right.
So most disagreements, most misunderstandings come out of a result of not being able to understand each other correctly. And most of the time that's to do with translation. At the same time, significant number of retailers want to have a personalized experience for their customers. So therefore they need to have their websites translated. They need to have their marketing brands translated or even localized, which is a more sort of in phrase in the language market, because it's then personalized for a local region. So the big word receives work from clients of all different sectors, private and public sector. And then we source self-employed linguists to translate or interpret, which is the spoken version of translation, the documents or the interpreting assignment. And then we fulfill that for the customer. So we're a bit like a brokering service, I think is the best way to put it. We take a lot of work in, and then we go and buy time off linguists for them to do the actual translation. And we've got a number of language professionals that work internally as well. And we're a language technology company really now. And that's what I was really referring to earlier, in the fact that we automate most of that. So, interpreting, give you an example of interpreting. You go to a court and you are not a native English speaker. To be able to attend court, you need to have an interpreter who speaks your local language and is able to speak English to be able to communicate. So we provide interpreting remotely and in person for the Ministry of Justice in the UK, countrywide. Pretty much all the courts. It's huge, absolutely huge.
Absolutely, I can imagine, yeah.
And we do interpreting in the US, in China, all around the world. And what we've done is we've built a system that you put your requirements in, and it automatically, using algorithms, automatically sources your most suitable linguist to attend whatever meeting you're asking for. So if it's face-to-face, it'll be geolocation and language and things like that. If it's a video remote interpreting solution, which is sort of becoming more popular now, then geolocation doesn't really matter. You just have to be able to connect the request with the supply with the demand, I suppose is the best way to put it. So we fulfill language services, but we provide language and language services technology around the world. And actually 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, we launched the world's first ever technology platform to be able to arrange interpreting and or translation all in one platform. So traditionally they've always been separate. We brought them all together. But it's really interesting is the big word. And it's a really interesting market is the language services. And this is what really attracted me to it. Technologically, miles behind when I joined 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So they had clearly, every language services organization worth their salt spent some money in technology maybe over the last 10 years. But then they were just building on top of it constantly. So they just ended up, I used the phrase earlier, big monolithic systems that take months to change. And there's many problems with what you're changing because you change this thing here and it affects something over here you didn't think it was connected to. Real challenge. What's brilliant about the big words when I came in is that they had a desire to change, but they didn't really know what they wanted to change into. So that was my job. So for example, during my 2 years, we have gone completely Office 365. We introduced Teams 18 months ago. We had flexible working 16 months ago. Most of my technology team, I have software developers in the UK. I have an IT team in the UK. I've got infrastructure guys in Hyderabad in India. I've got software developers and business analysts in Hyderabad in India. I've got a centre of excellence over there, which works absolutely brilliant. So we were working remotely before working remotely was a thing.
Before it became fashionable.
Yeah. And what it enabled us to do was actually become more attractive as an employer as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because
you've got a bigger talent pool to choose from as well, haven't you?
Bigger talent pool, more flexible working. I say to everybody, it's not necessarily company policy, but for me, I don't really care what hours you do. I care about the value that you produce at the end of it.
Absolutely.
So that's really the principle that I live by, and I think everyone who works with me would tell you the same thing. All my colleagues, all my teammates, they will say I'm massively demanding. I hugely expect excellence every single time. There is no when you've got brilliant people, you should produce brilliant things, and when you're not producing brilliant things, that means you're taking the eye off the ball for a bit. But what I do is I say, something I learned really well at Hermes is actually we work really bloody hard, so we should play quite hard as well. So there's time for relaxation. If you do a full weekend of working, take a couple of days off during the week. It's perfectly fine. But we have standards that we all check ourselves against. If we don't hit those standards, then we're probably massively self-critical, and that's enabled us to completely redesign our technology stacks. We were on-premise data centers. We're now fully in the Azure cloud. We're able to have a bit more of a robust data strategy. Applications aren't falling over like they used to a few years ago because you'd hit the limit of the data center server capability. We're now infinitely scalable. We're building all of our applications to be cloud native, which gives us a lot more flexibility, scalability, and the ability to produce more sort of 2020 technology, which is the thing that excites developers, it excites product people, it excites business analysts, product owners. Doing something that was cool 3 years ago doesn't excite that many people.
Things move so quick, don't they? I mean,
that's the evolution of things, isn't it?
Of course,
it's like when I first got told, I remember this, it's really very, very clear to me, we need to have more modern technology. That was one of the goals that I was given. And I remember I was a former CEO at the Big Word, and I remember talking to him and saying, so which year's technology do you want me to make it to be modern? And he looked at me a bit confused. He was from Germany. And I was like, well, I can give you 2020 technology, but if we start building it now, it'll be 2021, which means it's a year behind. So we can scrap all that and actually go for 2021 technology, a bit more risky. We don't know if it'll work, but what is it that you want? And it was clear they didn't know. So they just wanted the end result, which is fine.
Of course, yeah.
So, fully Office 365, full data center decommission, full cloud migration, an absolute digital revolution across the entire business.
Wow.
There
What was
was
it
no
like
Skype.
implementing that then? Because you must have had a few sort of raised eyebrows and say, "Oh, who's this guy? Thinks he's Mark Zuckerberg or whatever, coming in trying to change all my little circle of what I know, trying to, because people are scared of change, aren't they? How did you combat that? What's that?
Were you actually there? Were you part of the team? Because that's exactly what happened. No, I think what's brilliant is the company had a desire to move in a certain direction. This is where these things come together. My team had a desire to work in a certain way. They wanted to be able to tell their mates they worked in Agile, or they worked in tribes, and they did all of this sort of stuff, right? Which we did. And there was a desire for the business to be more effective. So when you put all those three things together, all I needed was the team and the people to be on side. I needed to have the investment, and I needed to have the vision. So once you define what your vision is, as long as you don't get, deviated away from that, that vision, every single thing that we do takes us a step closer to our goal. If it's not taking us a step closer to the goal, we stop doing it. It's as simple as that. But the goal doesn't change every 5 minutes. But the goal is equally not a KPI. It's got to be 70%. The goal to me was a vision. It was, I wanted the big word to have the same experience for someone ordering a translation project or an interpreter in Chile as they would do in Sweden or the UK or New York. So we needed to have an infrastructure across the global business that gave consistency. So for example, the speed in the UK office was quicker for the internet than it was in New York, right? It's very simple. Let's put an MPLS network in. Let's equalize them. Let's make sure we've got we partnered with Vodafone and put a huge MPLS network in around the world. Expensive. What does it do for us? It means we can move our systems 50-60% quicker. It means you've got no lag time. It means you can fulfill the jobs quicker. It means you've got less of a challenge with uploading documents. And on uploading documents, there's various different versions, but we had a solution that we looked at, and it had been implemented on premise. So it was a file sharing solution that was on premise. It was always limited. So it took hours. So we just moved it to the cloud and opened it up and proved the results. So you can't walk into an ownership group and say, I want this amount of millions of pounds to transform your business. What will it do for me? Not really sure. We'll work that out as we go. That doesn't wash, right? I needed to give them a reason to do it. So a consumption-based model, which meant they only spent what they earned. So as the revenue came in, your consumption goes up. As the revenue goes down, your consumption goes down, rather than having this fixed model. And the way I explained it, hopefully, was that currently the IT and software development bit part of the business had too high a fixed cost, far too high. So every business gets crosswinds, thunder, lightning, rain, things that go well, things that go badly. And the issue that I had is the fixed cost base was at such a level that the slightest bit of challenge to the business, we would be massively impacted. We're huge on cost in that area, and I needed to get rid of that.
Yeah.
So the only way to do it was by changing the technology. But on the flip side, I wanted the experience of our office team to be better. So none of them cared about Office 365 when we introduced it. But what they did care about was they were currently using Skype at that time, which had been put in on premise. Don't ask me why. It was before my time. But for some reason, someone wanted a Skype solution, which meant that when you had a video call, you could only see modern art on the other side. That was the reality of the situation. Didn't work. Yeah. So as soon as we changed it to cloud version of Skype, people could see each other, and it worked. Then when we introduced Teams, and we went through a huge session of, and Microsoft, by the way, absolutely amazing support that I had from Microsoft, and I have to this day, and still do. Brilliant supporters of what we were trying to do as a business. And change Office 365, bring all that in, go to Azure, do all of those sort of good things. And they became champions for us. So they'd come into the business and they'd train people, or they'd talk to them about how to do things in a different way, or why this is a benefit for you. And then, of course, people could work from home. How good's that? I've got a parcel delivering, so I can work from home. They didn't have to take a day off. So we won the hearts and minds of it. It was tough and it was challenging, but at the same time, my wonderful owner had invested in building a dedicated technology centre next to the Big Word site called the Brainworks. And we designed that from scratch, really. So it was just an empty warehouse shell, and now it's a modern technology centre with a wellness garden, with a beer garden, with some cool meeting rooms, some desks that are made from reclaimed materials, like old scaffolding and wood just put together. And it's absolutely awesome. It really
sounds very Silicon Valley, that is.
Yeah, it is. And that was what the view was. But it's what we tried to say was, like, I have a few principles, so I'm going to give away one secret slightly. So when we recruit people, we ask them one question. That's it. So you've got the qualification stuff, that's fine, right? But I only ask them one question, because depending on the answer to that question, depends on what type of role they're going to be good at. Because that's what's important to me. Culture, people, personality, right? So I think we can teach anyone to do anything, but you've got to have the desire to be great, to work well, I think, at the Big Word now, particularly in my area. If you take the easy option, or you are really dedicated between Monday and Friday between 9 and 5, all good luck to you. That's wonderful. But we don't live in a world of 8 hours. We live in a world of value. So, I can tell you, I was in Iceland on holiday 15 weeks ago, and we had an issue at 5:30 in the morning in Iceland. And I came onto the Teams call that was happening to see where we were going. And I already had 5 people on it. They'd already picked it up. They were already dealing with it. And they'd been on the call for an hour, and they were pretty much resolving it there and then. No one had to ask them to do that. That's the culture that you grow from this. And the question that I ask is, I ask people to tell me the problems with a self-service checkout. Right? You got Sainsbury's, you got Morrison's,
yeah,
self-service checkout. Tell me the problems, tell me how you solve it. And that was our last year's question, so I'm not giving that too much away. So the people who are BAs, business analysts, okay?
I tell you what, before you go there, let me have a stab and let me answer it, okay?
Go on, go for it.
It's when you're buying alcohol, right? Or that says a lot about me, doesn't it? Or anything, or you have a problem and the red light goes on and you turn around and there's nobody there. And you've got to wait there for ages, and I'm like, oh, what is going on? I should have just gone to the other till. You know what I mean? So that's what I would say.
So what would you do?
I probably won't get the job.
So what would you do about it, though? What would you do? How would you solve the problem?
I would solve the problem is what I always do, which is I go and find someone.
Yeah.
I walk over and say, excuse me, can you give me a hand, please?
So you can put yourself into whichever bracket I'm going to tell you, because I have multiple answers to that question. So you're not wrong. There is no wrong answer. But I already know where you would fit in my organization from that answer. Okay? Because that's your natural resting point. This is how what your natural resting point is. I want to solve this specific problem I have, which annoys me, and I want to go and find someone to help me solve the problem. Okay? That's fine. And that's one option. The middle option, like a business analyst, most of the time they'll say, I can't do anything without requirements. That's a bit of a sort of in-joke with BAs. But let's just say that they do. They would probably try and optimize the process a bit more. So they might they might design the barcoding scanning system to be a little bit more efficient, or the weighing scale might be a bit more efficient. They might look at that. The product people would say, I need it to have a smile at the end of it, or something like that. That would be kind of good. But let's sort of talk quite seriously. Software developer would say, it's got too much lag between you putting some information in and getting some information out. So they'd look to change that. Yeah. But what if you were looking for an innovator, someone that you want to run your R&D team, or as part of your research and development? What I'd want as an answer is someone coming in and going, well, I'd throw them all away. Because in my world, you wouldn't have a self-service checkout, because I'd put tags on all of the products so that when you pick a product up, you're automatically paid for it in your trolley. So you don't actually need to do a checkout. So we ask that one question because I need to know where your natural resting point is.
Which coincidentally Amazon are doing right now, I think, aren't they? In their new stores. So yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And it's a case of, do you want to fix the problem that's there, or do you want to have a look about looking at the entire real estate and changing your mindset?
Absolutely.
And that's really how I spend my time understanding who I want. I don't want all innovators. That would be a nightmare. We'd never get anything done.
Yeah, of course it would. Yeah.
They all have different ideas.
Let me ask you a question, Mark, because this is a really interesting. I interviewed Bruce Daisley a couple of weeks ago, who is the ex-VP of Twitter, and he's kind of from a sales background himself, and he's left Twitter now. He's an author of workplace culture. But anyway, we were talking about product in a software context. Product people, like, obviously what you forged a career around, and he was saying that he was on a call with a load of MBA, MBA sort of students, I think they were, and they all wanted to work in product management and product development. And he was kind of more encouraging them to work in business development and sales because they weren't from an engineering background. And he said, in his experience, that you tend to have a more fruitful career in product development if you are from more of an engineering background.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, or do you think? And where we were going with this, by the way, is that we were talking about how sales has become a dirty word, and sales makes the world go round. So I don't know when that happened. Yes, but I mean, all MBA grads all of a sudden want to work in product; they don't want to work in sales. But I think we need to be. There's a lot of sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Go on, sorry.
It's a really interesting question. I personally think that product is the hardest place to work. It's the hardest place to work. And let me explain why. Most organizations around the world have no idea what product management or product development is. That's your first start point.
Yeah.
And when a product manager or anyone that's responsible for product starts doing their job, there's two ways that they get interacted with. One is they have to have all the answers. That's the first thing. What are you going to do with this? Well, I don't know. And the second thing they've got to deal with is everyone thinks that they can do their job better than them. So everyone can design a better product. Everyone is a secret underneath wants to be a product designer. That's what they do. I could do that better than they do.
It's like being a football manager a bit, isn't it? Everyone else is picking the team, and everyone knows better than you.
and then you've got loads of really good people who've written some really good books who have caused a nightmare for anyone who works in product when they use the phrase a product manager is a mini CEO. No, you're not. You're not. Because as soon as you think you're a mini CEO of your own product, that's when it becomes a problem. You need to be the facilitator, the engager, the influencer. So product is about influencing. It's about sales. It fits naturally in the commercial area. If you cannot sell your product to people internally, what hope has it got externally? That's the big thing. So an engineer can go into product development, but product development is about developing something that someone else has designed.
Yeah.
You want to design a product.
Sorry. I was going to say, one thing from talking to you and you talking about your career, one observation I've made is that all of the things that you have regarded as development areas for you from back when you were talking about the art of silence, which I think is brilliant, by the way. The art of silence, the stuff around, maybe with an exception of the process of the Kazan stuff and the Toyota stuff. But certainly the art of silence and the Stephen Covey book and all that kind of thing. It sounds like all of your development has been in the area of the commercial side, because obviously you've come from an engineering background, but you've learned so much on the commercial side, which has enabled you to marry the two together and become a product person. Is that what you're saying?
100% right. 100% right. And actually, to go a step further, is the only reason I have any credibility on the board at the Big Word. Because most CIOs or technology directors think they should have a seat at the board because they're an expert in their field. That's not what it is. You go to a board to talk about finance. You talk about gross margins. You talk about EBITDA. You talk about budgets and forecasts and things. If you can't talk credibly about those areas and P&Ls, then you've got no place being there. And if you are there as a technology director and you feel like your voice isn't being heard, normally the problem is that you don't have the commercial understanding to be able to engage with the other people in that area. And that I think is the reason why you've got a new breed of CIO, like myself, I would think, who are not from infrastructure or software development backgrounds, specifically and per se. Because, you try and put these things across. It's like an architect. So an architect can't necessarily be a CEO. So an architect of a building doesn't mean he's going to be a good CEO of a business. But in technology, we seem to think, well, the best architect surely should run the business. No, not really. Let them design products and design architecture, not necessarily run a business. But I think, product, my natural resting point is logic and engineering. I think I was good at maths, good at science. I was never the best in the class, but I was probably in the top 10 in most of those disciplines. Did pretty well generally. But you're absolutely right. My development was 100% based on learning and training in things that I wasn't good at. Not learning and training things that I was good at, which I see a lot of people doing. What are you going on a course on today? Oh, I'm going on a course on Agile. Oh, so you do Agile every day? Yeah, but I need the qualification now. But
it's feeding the ego a little bit though, isn't it? Because you can go into the class and talk a good game because you know about it, but you wouldn't be going into a class and sort of not know it, just be the least informed in the class because it's a complete development sort of area, development experience for you then.
And spending time with salespeople and spending time with account management people and the difference in those roles, the subtleties in the difference. So the hunters and the farmers, I found that fascinating. Really, really fascinating. And then I started assessing all of my friends to see who was a hunter and who was a farmer.
Story of my life, that little concept is.
Yeah, it's very challenging. But when you don't have any experience of it and you've not gone in a sales area or a commercial area, it's very, very difficult to explain those concepts to people who haven't experienced them. It also on the product side, you cannot develop a product if you've only ever worked in product. You have to work in different areas of different businesses to get the experience. So if you're going to lead the development of a new product to market, well, which market? Have you worked in the market before? What's your probability of success? Is it going to be a leapfrog product or is it a Me Too product? There's so many questions you can ask in that area that if you don't know the market or you haven't challenged yourself in different areas, you're going to probably end up being, not disrespectful way, you're probably product marketing. So you're just going to spend your time marketing someone else's product, really. But yeah, I think product is I'm really passionate about. It's the area, the commercial side is the area I've had to work the hardest on. Finance, it's logic. So that when I started, learning and reading, it fit quite nicely. But the art of selling, the art of being an entrepreneur, balancing that risk against reward, I find really fascinating. And I'm probably not the most entrepreneurial, but I think I have some of the best slight 5% more ideas, if that makes sense. So
absolutely,
we've got this product, how do we move it forward 5%? I think I'm good at that. But yeah, fantastic. So it's been a fascinating time.
Brilliant. Well, look, Mark, I think we are coming towards the end of the allocated time now. I know we've overrun because we had a bit of a gap earlier on because I'm having a kitchen installed, which is which you might be able to hear in the background. There's two questions I want to finish on, okay? Because I've been really keen to get your thoughts on. First of all, I'm just sort of there's a lot of companies out there, a lot of technology leaders who are going through a difficult time. What sort of leadership advice would you give to a team who are sort of all of a sudden having to remotely manage their teams or remotely lead their teams, going through a difficult period in a difficult economy? What would you say? What sort of snippets of advice would you give to these sort of managers and business owners and entrepreneurs?
So it's a really good question. I think unfortunately the way that I answer it, the second part of it is really like the equivalent of putting a plaster on of my answer, really. I think the people who've successfully managed to use this pandemic well are the ones who already trusted their workforce, trusted their team. Because if you trust people to get on with their work, I know from my position, I was at events, I'm at clients, I'm at suppliers, I'm very rarely in the office on Monday to Friday every single day. So if I didn't trust my team in the office to get on with things and I was micromanaging them, that would be a real big challenge now you go remotely. That said, what advice would I give for the remote side other than the trust side? Because obviously you're not going to build that trust overnight. I think it's really, really quite straightforward. Be available, listen, give them targets that are meaningful, KPIs that they can manage within, and actually spend some time talking about life. So ring them up and say, how was your weekend? How are the kids? Did you get this done? Did you get that done? It takes 15 minutes, but the value is endless when you remember something that's underneath. And also give them a little bit of a bit of free time, really, because you don't know what's happening behind closed doors. You never do. Someone could come to work every day and just be happy to be out of the house, and now all of a sudden they have to work from home every single day, surrounded by whatever and whoever. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be stressful. But we need to move our ability to understand our teammates and colleagues away from just, have you delivered what you said you were going to deliver? In the remote world, we have a responsibility to our team members, emotionally, socially, spiritually, as well as work-wise. And I think if you let any of those go, you're not really supporting your team as well as you could do. That said, technology-wise, practical things, we love Teams in our business. We think Teams is one of the best things that's ever been brought about. We absolutely engage with Office 365, so you can collaborate. I know there's other tools out there. Other tools are available, so to speak, to be able to do those things. And also think differently. Encourage people to think differently. Well, if you had a face-to-face meeting before and that was effective, well, can you go to the park and have a face-to-face meeting? Can you do, just think differently, do something a bit different, and trust them, and reassure them. This is a really, really challenging time for people. Most people will be sat at home on a night thinking, am I going to lose my job in a few weeks? That's what's going to happen. And we have to reassure them and support them. So I think trust, support, and embracing new technology, I think, is the way forward. And lead by example.
Good old-fashioned lead from the front.
Yeah, it sounds silly, doesn't it? But if I go onto a meeting and I criticise the technology, I've not put it in, but that gives an excuse for someone else to criticise the technology. Oh, I hate Teams. Teams is rubbish. If I start doing that, everyone does that. So you got to lead from the front a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's brilliant advice, Mark. I think that's really good. You touched on some amazing points there. And it's funny, I asked that question at the end of pretty much every podcast I've done for the last 2 or 3 months, and I've recorded quite a lot of content, and there's a lot of patterns in terms of what people like yourself say. So I'm pretty sure that the listeners will get lots of value from that. Look, I wanted to ask you on a finish on this one. I just wanted to get the crystal ball out, okay? And let's have a look forward. This is a difficult time, but it also could be perceived as an exciting time. What are you excited by right now in terms of business, technology, innovation? What's the future look like for business and technology right now, Mark?
So without being buzzword bingo, what I love about artificial intelligence and machine learning in 2020 and moving on is how much of it's become a commodity. So it's so easily accessible now. Developers can access it. You can build your own tools. You don't need a data scientist organization to put things together anymore. It's more widely available. And because it's more widely available, I think it'll get used more, and the use will grow. But I think so AI and machine learning, absolutely in the language market, hugely. Machine translation is a huge part of the business. How you use machine translation to your advantage, I think, is a real game changer, and that's where machine learning and AI comes in. I think sort of robot process automation, or RPA, gets referred to a lot. I think that will grow more. I think the non-value added tasks that happen in a business at the moment, I think we want to remove as a whole, and we want to replace that time, rather than people, with retraining people into more value added roles. So rather than the administrative roles that are there at the moment, people say that the computer will take over the world. Well, it hasn't done so far. It's just changed the jobs that people do. People aren't miners and printers and tradesmen anymore. They do different roles. There's more people in the world than there ever has been, and there's more jobs in the world than there ever has been. So I don't really fear for people's jobs there, but I would like to see more on that side. But the most important thing for me, which we're spending a lot of time on, and we're talking about maybe the next year or two, is sort of the growth of 5G and what that actually means to the world as a whole. So, when 4G or broadband and Internet of Things all first came out, everyone's mind exploded with what you could do. And some people did it, some people didn't. I think we're moving to a point with 5G that actually those things will start really becoming a reality. You'll get more smart houses, more autonomous vehicles. Tesla leading the way hugely. Everyone's following now. I can't imagine there's going to be, other than a PR event, I can't imagine there being a combustion engine car that's really going to be pushed over the next 2 or 3 years. I think it's predominantly going to be electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So 5G is really, really important. It raises massive questions for me. So the more Internet of Things connectivity across the world, the more security questions there are. So I think the rise of the importance of information security, data security, globally across organizations, I think that one to watch. I think we may end up in a world where you may have information security or data developers, that specific role of building that technology. Cloud will obviously rise, the use of things. The last thing I'd say is, rather than technology, is more people thing. Most organizations, including ours, will employ people called full stack developers. We do that all the time, a bit of everything. I think that's going to change, particularly over the next 2 or 3 years. I think we're going to end up with more specialisms in developers, and I think companies like ours would be more available to go and get specialisms, because you need someone that's a bit more front end, you need someone that's a bit more back end, or data or cloud architects or things like that. I think
that would be going full circle then, wouldn't it? Because that's kind of the way it used to be, surely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all very sort of fragmented into different areas of the software lifecycle before, wasn't it? And then we seem to put it all together. I want them to do everything.
Yeah. I think that's exactly how it's going to go, because I can't imagine a software developer being a generalist in the future. I can't see it. I think most developers that I know, good developers, they have a passion for what they're developing and the area that they're developing in. It's not just a job, it's something that they actually love doing, and they want to be invested emotionally into the thing that they're trying to develop as well at the same time. I just think that desire, that personality, the way they work, and the demand for developers, by the way, the demand, we're going to need more decentralized roles in the future. That might not be next year, but I'd say there'll be a trend towards that over the next 3 years. I actually think, joking, a little joke here, I think you're going to see some stupid job titles as well.
Probably.
Not a big fan of the stupid job titles, you can probably tell. But if it makes someone happy, fine.
Yeah.
I think we'll see some of those. So yeah, I would say summarize 5G. I don't see quantum computing doing anything in the next year or two. I think that's very proof of concept stuff. That's
very Star Trek, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit like blockchain. Blockchain has some uses, but most people wouldn't be able to tell you what they are. Yet it was going to change the world 2 years ago. It may come back in the future, but that's more the back end stuff that it's supporting and growing, rather than anything front end. So I think the same there. Remote working, I don't think we'll all be fully remote working. Unfortunately, the one thing that people forget with remote working is that we are all people, and we are social animals, and we like to interact with people. I think maybe we might move to 2 or 3 days in the office rather than 5 days in the office, or 5 days out.
Yeah, I think that's likely, isn't it? I think
we might even not have weekends. We might not even have weekends in the future, because
well, they're already talking about getting rid of the Sunday hours on Sundays, aren't they? And so that's going to be probably a bit of a paradigm shift when they do that, because then there's not much unique about the weekends then, is there really, after the Sunday hours thing goes?
These things are difficult to manage, really difficult to manage. How do you manage a completely flexible workforce? Really challenging. Again, trust and controls, and again, it's Toyota's production system. You get your controls right, and you can get these things out. But I think that will rise. I think we'll see a consolidation in the language market. There's a lot of players in the language market, and that'll consolidate over the next 18 months. Ourselves launching WordSync, our new sort of primary product I mentioned earlier, that's the type of direction that most of the big boys will go in. Yeah. That consolidation of platform-based approach, rather than necessarily the value being in the language services piece. So it's a really interesting time for technology, a really interesting time for me, because I'll have done 3 years at the Big Word in about 2 weeks, and I joined the Big Word with a 3-year plan, and I only ever actually, to be fair, hands up, we've delivered it actually. Granted, I didn't really want to test my huge global disaster recovery with a pandemic, but it worked, which was good. But I didn't actually necessarily see myself 3 years ago writing a new 3-year plan, which we've just done. So that's really interesting for me, that now we've done that, fixing the infrastructure, fixing the way the platforms are put together, defining a direction for the future, making ourselves more cloud, making ourselves more agile, making ourselves more flexible. Now it's product the next 3 years. It is, how do we make sure we maximize machine translation, Internet of Things? When you go to your fridge, why does it need translating? I'm not sure what type of fridge you have, but you seem like the type of person to me that has a fridge that talks to you. Very Star Trek. So
if you listen closely, you can probably hear my fridge being installed right now. We're having a new kitchen put in. I'm constantly putting you on mute and off mute to not coincide with the drilling. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think the fridge is one of those things that you only want to build it once and sell it to every country. The only thing you should change is the power. But why should you have to change what's written on the front? You shouldn't really. It should just happen. So integrated workflows, a bit more automation in there, I think is important. But yeah, that's where really I think technology is going. 5G, whoever.
There's a lot of conspiracy around that, isn't it? 5G. I think it's certainly around the invasion of privacy and things like that. This Orwellian sort of people being tracked in terms of in terms of geotech, in terms of your location and things like that. It's quite divisive. I don't know how I feel about 5G. I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but it's inevitably going to be progression, isn't it? It's a lot more powerful than 4G, I hear. So South Korea is already up and running with 5G, I think, isn't it? And
and it just means that anywhere you walk, you're connected. Anywhere you go, you're simply connected. So if you data privacy and security, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done in those areas, particularly in the UK. I don't think they should be storing a load of stuff that they don't need and all of that, the good stuff we've talked about. But from a consumer perspective and from a person perspective, actually, the trends of everything is making your life quicker, smarter, and easier.
Yeah,
this takes it a step further. That's as simple as that.
I'll tell you one thing about 5G that I heard about was if it does get rolled out globally and they sort of achieve the vision of it, it'll enable surgeons to perform operations remotely in like third world countries where they haven't got the expertise or whatever. You know what I mean? They'll be able to just do so many things. In terms of health tech, for example, will be benefited massively from 5G, as will lots of other ones as well. Ag tech is another one, agricultural technology as well will benefit massively from it. So I can see a lot of good
going in that direction. Yeah.
Sorry?
And that's exactly why we're going in that direction, I think, as an industry.
Yeah, of course. Mark, it's been brilliant to talk to you. We could literally talk all day about all these things. Is there anything you want to finish in terms of the big word? Anything exciting coming up? Anything notable that you wanted to sort of talk about?
I say the only thing I would say is that we've I mentioned it earlier, we launched our new product WordSync 2 weeks ago. We're really, really proud of that. It's interpreting and translation all in one place. It's a really exciting time for the big word now moving to become a language technology company, more than a language services company moving forward. We've got the app version of WordSync coming out. We've got a new video solution of WordSync coming out. So it's exciting. So, people can see me on LinkedIn and other connections and things like that. I'm always happy for a chat. So yeah, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, brilliant. Good luck with all WordSync and all other future endeavors. Okay, all the best. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers.